take the time to kind of understand and learn more about how advising will work. These are kind of will be hopefully a regular occurrence throughout the school year, and will be a chance for you to kind of hear from diverse resources, kind of like active activities here, but more specialized and with a greater focus on like what they can do for you. So I'm really excited to present this CET. It's going to be a great CET, I'm sure. And to introduce the speaker, the Vice Chair of Outreach, Ricky, is going to introduce Dean Bassett. Thank you.
Hey guys, so our speaker for the evening is going to be Dean Bassett. Dean Bassett joined the staff of the Office of African American Affairs in 2007, where her primary responsibility was to advise and support undergraduate students interested in pursuing degrees in natural and health sciences. Dean Bassett is also director of OAA's nationally recognized peer advisory program. Dean Bassett is a member of the university's crisis management team. She earned her bachelor's of art in chemistry from Lincoln University, and she also holds a PhD in chemistry from the University of Virginia. Please join me in welcoming Dean Bassett.
I've been told that this is going to be recorded, so normally when I would want to stand over there, I was okay to come into the middle of the room. Thank you guys so much for coming today. I know that, I think Alice is your name, said that, you might have better things to do, but I believe that this is probably the best place for you to be this evening. I think you all have been looking forward to coming and hanging out with me, and I'm really glad that you guys are here. And I think especially as people who have taken on the role of mentoring and advising first-year students, it's probably valuable to you to be here to gain more information about how to do that and how to do it better. And so I'm glad to be here. The first thing that I wanted us to do today is not talk about who I am, but for you all to have an opportunity to share with one another who you are. So if you can start passing out those forms, that would be great. What I want you guys to do, I'm going to take a couple of minutes. I want you guys to get into groups of 2. And I want you guys to use this handout that you're going to get to have a conversation with one another. I want you to listen very carefully, because some of you will be called on at random to introduce your partner. And the idea is that you need to talk to somebody in this room that you don't know well. So I'm just going to guess that the person sitting next to you is probably not the person that you should be with, because you probably just sat next to you. So I want if you guys can do that, we're going to take about 10 minutes. You can either fill out the form. I'm sorry, can I have everybody's attention, please? You can either fill out the form if you want to, or you can just use it as a guide as to have a conversation. And then you're taking up time with each person to answer all the questions of the form, okay? All right. I think couples that want to volunteer, tell us about whoever your partner was in the exercise. I only know a handful of people that would rather not. I'm sure they would prefer me not to call them. So maybe you want to nudge your friends and how about this young lady here in the orange dress?
My partner's name was Camille. She's a nursing student, and she hopes that her mentees get out of this friendship as well as friendship.
And Camille?
I didn't really write it down.
So if you had to introduce her to the room, then what would you say?
Let's see. Well, I mean, she just wants to gain communication with them and be able to share an experience. So just so they know how to navigate the whole process.
How about this gentleman here with the blue shirt, the yellow cup here?
My partner's name is Mahir. He's an engineering student, 3rd year, and he wants his mentees to gain an informed opinion, and he thinks he can achieve that by bringing his previous experience and his knowledge about engineering school.
So this is Elijah. One of his favorite ways to spend his free time is listening to music, and he hopes that his mentees will gain confidence in his programs. And one thing that is important for people to know about him is that he's really honest.
What about you, your relationship?
Alright, my partner's name is Tay, and her favorite way to spend time is watching Netflix. She likes the show Criminal Minds. She's also very blunt about things. And one thing she hopes to gain from being a ULink advisor is leadership skills and applying it to the advising and helping role.
My partner's name is Braden. He's a second year. His favorite way to spend his free time is surfing and being around on the beach. He is organized and he has a great time management skill. And the most important thing he hopes his mentees will gain is that is someone who they can talk to about anything even after this academic year when we become second or fourth years.
Awesome, thanks. When you back here in the blue and orange. Yep, just because I thought you were volunteering last night. I just you raising your hand in the air.
Sure. My partner's name is Chloe. Her most important role in life, outside of UVA, is being a family member, or, the part that she plays in her family. And at UVA, she thinks it is being a peer health educator. And one of the strengths that she brings to being a ULink advisor comes from her experience with peer health education that allows her to be able to more confidently talk about difficult topics with her advisees.
My partner's name is Daniel. His most important role in life, I guess, is to be a resource to friends and family. He really likes good film. He's open-minded. And his greatest fear, or worry, I should say, is to be underutilized by his advisees.
So how many people actually talked to somebody that they didn't know? Great. How did it feel to talk to this, essentially a stranger about some of these personal, they're not super personal, but these things that are personal to you? Any about you? What's your name?
Anna.
Hi, everyone. Sorry.
It was nice to see that we have a lot of things in common, I guess.
And did your partner, except this is a question for somebody else, did your partner do or say anything to help you to relax while you all were talking? And if so, what? Did you notice that?
We kind of skip some of the harder questions. And then we came back around and that towards the end got easier.
Right, so you start off with some like softballs, like, oh, let's talk about some of the low lying things, right? And then it's easier to have this conversation here. So there's anyone else? Yes.
I asked side questions to kind of clarify things and kind of ease the topic around.
To make the conversation more natural. What's your name?
I'm Kate.
Katie.
We both shared pretty quickly, which I don't know, sometimes it's hard to share it with someone. It's easy to say oh, the most important thing about me is that I like cheese, instead of that I am, I said I'm too cautious, right, or something. We got into some deep stuff pretty quickly, so that was good.
And then what did you do, if you were deliberate about doing this, what did you do to make your partner feel more comfortable? Like if you know that they were nervous, what's something that you did to make them feel more comfortable? What's your name?
Josh.
Josh.
I think actually we tried to avoid the generic answers and really thought about what we were saying and just kind of was very honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think just because of that we both made each other feel comfortable with sharing our real answers instead of just kind of let's get through this and be done with it.
That's a great point. If you're honest and sincere, then you will draw that out of the other person. And then if you all had to do this over again, how would you do it differently? What would you do differently? Everybody feels like you would have done it better.
I'd maybe read over the questions, talk about it, and then when we're done talking, write notes on what I would remember, rather than having to write after every question, because that just kind of makes it more mechanical.
Is your hand up? Well, if you have to do it differently. Okay.
Maybe what I started off was just having a conversation about who we are, what we are at the university.
Okay, great. Awesome. And so why do you think we do something like this as a part Julia.
Because you know, people in relationships, we were trying to use the word that students actually ask questions with their
Yeah, so building relationships with the lives, that's true. Anyone else? Listening?
Katia.
Tati?
Katia.
Tati.
To help us realize that we're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah, so everybody in here, you all are working together towards the same goal. Anyone else? Okay.
To break down communication barriers
What do you mean by that?
in terms of like us like just getting to know each other on like a more personal level and allowing ourselves to just like build a more roots.
So even in the room where you all get to know each other, I think that one of the things that you have, one of the great resources that you have as advisors is this network that you have in here. You might have a student who's taking classes that you've never taken before, but if you get to know the people in this room, like, oh, my friend Kate took that class, let me ask her so I can have some more information so that you can be a better advisor. And I think sometimes we can miss that. We think, okay, this is my task and I need to do it, but there's a whole network of people in here and then even at the university that you can plug into that you can better serve the students that have been entrusted to you. And so today we're going to talk about, I know you guys, at this point, most of you guys have already met your advisors, correct? And so this is, we're going to talk about getting ready for this next meeting that's coming up. It's a meeting that you guys are going to get together and talk to them about choosing courses for the spring, right? That's the next like mandatory meeting. We may be meeting with them on other issues, but that's the next like program-specific meeting. So I wanted to talk about what to do in preparation for that meeting, and just giving you guys some skills and tips and best practices that we've seen through our peer advisor program, and then open up this conversation for you guys to answer questions, to ask questions as well. And so the first thing you want to do before the meeting, obviously, is schedule the meeting. And ideally, you want to schedule this meeting before they meet with their faculty advisor. Part of the reason is really helping them get in the habit of preparing to go in to meet with their faculty advisor so they can have the best experience there. And I would say to plan for about, 30 minutes. I don't imagine it will necessarily take the whole time, but you want to make sure that you block enough time so that you're not rushed while you're meeting with them. In your email or however you choose text message, however you set the meeting up with the student, it's a really good idea for you to ask them to send you a copy of their current schedule. This will help you prepare for the meeting. And then also to come to the meeting with a list of courses that they're already thinking about taking. Because it's important for them to be thinking already proactively about what it is that they want to do next semester. So that you don't turn into the parent in the relationship, like, oh, we need this, you need this. They really need to begin to own the process. And if you set that expectation at the beginning, then they'll begin to do that. And then the next thing I would say before the meeting is preparing for your meeting. You want to review their schedule. Right, this will give you a sense of their workload. It also gives you a sense if you're not familiar with their courses, they give you a chance to kind of look into that, to talk to the people in this room and the people on the deck about how to find out more information. And it'll help you to be more confident in your meeting, right? So you can ask really good questions. And it won't be like this when you come in and like, oh, I just got this paper and now all of a sudden I have to have this exchange with you. Does that make sense? And then you want to do your research. This will make you an invaluable resource to your students. They're like, oh, wow. So-and-so really cares about me. He or she sat down and they looked over my schedule, they were thinking about me. And that's really important because it creates that safety that's necessary so that you can have meaningful conversations. And then I would just say generate 2 or 3 questions. Like if it's a first-year student, which most of them are, correct? It's not most transfer students, it's just first years. All right, so if they haven't taken an NWAR yet, you want to make sure that they mention it. I think that general first years take if they need to meet their foreign language requirement. And then also beginning to ask them if they're thinking about their major, because there may be classes that they may need to take in the spring semester so that they can prepare their major next year. Does that make sense? And then as far as during the meeting, you want to start by asking open-ended questions. And then again, this is just some of the things that we talked about even in our opening, just getting the conversation going, just asking things like, how's the semester been going? How are you adjusting to your classes? Who's your favorite professor? Have you been going to office hours? Like those, just general questions. What's your favorite, spelling grounds? Have you found your place to study? Those things that you, again, just drawing out the relationships before you get into the questions that are more so related to what you're actually there to discuss, right? Have you given any thought about the major that you want to have? And what classes are you hoping to take in the spring? And it's going to be very important that while they're speaking, your temptation may be to take notes, and you can if that's most comfortable for you. It'll probably make your advisor feel weird if you're driving down the street and talking. That's why prepping for the meeting, I hope you get some of those things in order. The most important thing for you to do is to listen, and you have to actively listen so that you guys can have a constructive conversation. As your advisor is sharing with you, you want to make sure that you're making mental notes about the things you want to follow up on. And then when you ask the follow-up questions, they should be thoughtful. So why are you interested in taking that course? And however the conversation goes, it's really engaging them in that. You know, have you considered the time commitments? And so again, just getting them to begin to think and ask themselves questions like, oh, wow, maybe it's a bit much for me to take physics and chemistry and to be on club basketball and to, you know, all of these things that they may be planning on doing this spring, and maybe from your experience, you know, like, you know what, I don't know if you have time to do that. And so you want to ask them thoughtful questions and also ask them about a plan B. Y'all know that first year students don't necessarily get all of the classes they want because the expectations that they have 3 more years to do it. And upper class students have priority. And so they want to have the courses that they hope to get, but then they also need to have a plan B already ready to go before they go into SIS, right? They have a very narrow time block, and they want to make sure that they have all of their ducks in a row as much as they can before they go in. And then also, during the meeting, you want to offer suggestions. Notice that this is at the end, towards the end of the meeting, is when you offer your suggestions and express any concerns that you might have. And I think the thing that can be challenging when you're working in a peer-to-peer relationship is expressing those concerns, but that's why you're an advisor. And so you have to be willing to say the things that might be a little more challenging. And it's good that they hear it from you first in a safe space so they can think about them before they go meet with their advisor or other faculty members on as they're getting more advice. I think you want to offer suggestions based on your own experience or on your research. If they've already shared with you the classes that they've taken, and even ask them, if oh, okay, if they're taking, I always use chemistry as an example because it's a class that many first year students struggle in. And so they're telling you by the time you guys meet that they have not done so well, and that's kind of code for they're probably around the C or D because those are the majority of the grades, right? It's like, I'm not doing so well in chemistry, you know that they're probably in the C grade. Like the next semester I'm going to do, you're like, oh, you know what, is that wise? Might you want to take a break? Have you talked to your professor? Have you gone to office hours? You think it might be a good idea for you to hold off on maybe taking chemistry next semester and then taking it in the summer, doing the things that you need to do to catch up? Have you considered that if chemistry is giving you a hard time this semester, the next semester maybe you need to lighten up your workload so you can put more time into your course? So you have to ask those thoughtful questions and also express your concerns. And then the other thing that you want to encourage your advisors to consult other advisors because you don't know everything. If they're pre-health students, you want them to go over to University Career Services. If they're pre-law, then you want them to talk to the pre-law advisor or other students that have that experience here, being pre-law. Certain classes that, we don't have pre-law majors, we don't have pre-health majors, but there are classes that need to be taken for law school that will be a good idea to take, and then they can begin to think about them as they're planning out their course schedule, not just for next spring, but during their time here at the university. And the same thing for global development studies and political and social thought. These boutique majors that students want to apply to, there's certain classes that they need to begin to take, and you may or may not be familiar, and it's still a good idea because they have to apply for them and go and meet the program director and get a sense of what they need to do to be competitive, right? And then also you might be dealing with students who are looking to transfer within the school here. Students from the college who might transfer to Curry, or students who might transfer to the nursing school, from the nursing school to college, and so many different combinations. And if they're planning on doing that, then there are also people within their administrative offices in their school that they need to talk to so that they can make sure that transition is smooth. And then there may be classes. So if a student from the college wants to transfer into the School of Engineering, there's certain calculus courses that they need to take. And one or two classes in the college they can take as an elective to prepare to be able to jump into the swing of things as a second year in the school. But if you're not familiar with those nuances, you don't have to be. You just need to make sure that they can get to the people who can help you with that. and generally in the college office over in Monroe Hall or in Thornton Hall, you can connect with those people. And then finally, depending on how the conversation has gone with your advisor, there might be things that you picked up on in the conversation of, wow, would be a really good idea for you to go to the Writing Center. Or have you thought about going to the Mastering Center? I know that they have hours and Clemens throughout the week, but just making sure that you're putting out the resources that they could be using so that they can really get a strong start to their first semester here. And then I work in the Office of African American Affairs, as was mentioned before, and we have a ton of services that are offered in our office. And so if any of your advisors are from that community, you can certainly send them to our office and help them as well. I think, again, it's, you guys are ULink advisors, you're the link, right? They come to you and you're trying to help to link them to these other resources, and so it's really important for you to be able to help them. And then also, if things come up, I know some of you guys already mentioned wanting to be able to build relationships with your advisors that are beyond class. Many of you, if you create a safe space with your advisor, they can talk to you about anything. And if any of those things kind of go above their head, you can certainly refer them to the Dean of Student Office so they can begin to plug into other resources, maybe in the counseling center or student health, if some of those things are beyond the scope of just your relationship. And you just have to keep your eyes open, your ears, open for those things as well. So we're going to take a quick second here. We're going to invite some of the members of ULink Exec to come up and talk about, we're going to have some role playing about this meeting and what could or couldn't happen in a meeting with your advisor.
as a philosophy major, tried to push his favorite courses and favorite professors things onto her, even though she turned him down a couple times, said, you know, I really tried that, it's not my thing. I'm really interested in this, and he didn't really make the effort to help her out.
So he wasn't really listening to her, actually, you know, he came in with his own agenda. What else? What's your, Jasmine?
He also uses phone during meeting, and just sort of cut her off and not listen to her when she was talking.
So he could dismiss that she was there, answer his text messages. Definitely a no-no. Yes. Remind me of your name?
Kate,
Kate.
you should probably never tell your advisee that they're wrong. I mean, like, they might be wrong, and if they're informationally wrong, you can be like, oh, well, you know, actually, I think that that's not the case, or, you know, if you look, you know, you might look at the website, because I think that the prereq might be different for that major. But I don't know, just the word wrong, I think, has some implications to it.
Right. I think if the goal is to get the student to listen to you, you probably don't want to shut them down. You wouldn't, instead of saying things like, you should do this, you want to say things like, oh, have you considered? You know, and then if you're able to do some research before, like, oh, actually, I looked up the prereqs before I got here, and this is what I remember from the website, but maybe I'm wrong. But you should probably go back and check into that. I saw a hand over here.
I was going to say, you did a very good job of like leading the conversation and like really initially, kind of just like steer and how you want to say.
Yeah. So he expected her to come in and run the meeting. And I think that makes, on the one hand, you can be like, oh, okay, well, I'm her advisor, so she can come in and she'll ask me questions and I'll provide answers. But this is your first year, this is their first time having this experience. You're a more seasoned student, you know what it's like to come in and have these kinds of conversations, and so you have to guide them along so they can learn how to do that, right? So if she goes in to her professor with the same thing, like, oh, hey, how you doing? And he's like, so how can I help you today? She's like, I don't know, this was told us to come here and talk to you. Like, okay. But in the meeting that you all have with them, you can even begin to prepare them for how to go in and meet the faculty members and get that kind of support as well. Anyone else? Right, and even he was like, oh, you know, your major is stupid, can you even do that level of work? Like all of those things that just definitely belittling her. And those things are not, obviously he was being dramatic, I know that is not your personality, but there are subtle ways that we can do that. Like, ooh. So you want to make sure you watch your body language, making sure that you're not making faces when your advisor is saying things that you disagree with. You know, just want to, you know, take a deep breath. Look at the clock, or, you know, something like that where you're not looking away from them, but, you know, looking maybe just past until you can, again, just regain your own composure. Remember that this moment in time is not about you, what you think in that sense, but it really is about your advisor getting the support and the help that they need so they can make their best choices in this time. So I'm going to have another skip.
Everybody, I will play the role of advisee.
I will be advisor. Oh, hey, Eric. How's it
Good to
going?
see you. Things aren't good, Jason. I might
Oh,
go.
how's that class I told you to take? I believe it was it.
I might go.
Hey, hold up.
I might go as far as to say things are bad.
Things could not possibly be bad.
You know, you worked with me a lot making a schedule, and I
crafted the perfect
I
schedule.
can't do it. Underwater basket weaving is impossible.
That's not.
My fingers are not nimble enough to do it underwater. No baskets have come from that class.
What? I told him about underwater basket weaving. It was the best class. It was the most useful class I ever thought of. How could he be failing? Was it me? It must be his fault.
We were building such a strong relationship, and then he betrayed me. I have no faith in the university, the advising system, and myself.
I don't understand how you could possibly be doing bad at underwater basket weaving. You must be an imbecile.
I have no thoughts. I'm at a crossroads, and I don't know which way to go. Do I listen to Jason, my trusted advisor, the person who's supposed to be looking after my best interests?
What do I do? He looks at me like I'm important. Am I? Yes, I am. But I thought he was dumb. But is he? Is it me? It's him. I believe it's you.
Maybe I'm just not made for it. Maybe it's not my calling, Jason.
Everybody's made for it. It's the easiest class.
I mean,
It's the most useful
Jason, you
class.
consider that not everyone can be a part of carrier basket weaving. We can't all do it like you.
I gotta see you later. I can't handle this.
Thank you. Okay, so what went wrong here? Anybody? Obviously, what went wrong? Yes.
I always think that one tricky thing with recommending courses is that you shouldn't say, well, it's an easy course or it's a hard course. You should more like describe it as in like, oh, it's very intensive on reading. And I mean, if you like the environment, then it might be interesting. So when recommending it and then the person comes, if you say things like it's easy or it's hard and the person finds it differently, they might just blame you for taking it and like having a different take on the class.
That's excellent.
I think this came up in Daniel's in the previous skit too, is that if you're really pushing one class on your advisees, like you may have taken a phenomenal course and can highly recommend blank class, but if they don't like that one thing that you were like, it's basket weaving or nothing, they're gonna feel like they never want to take another fine arts course. I don't know if it's fine arts. But you can say, have you ever been interested in taking a history course? I took a really great course in American history. If that's something you're interested in, I'm happy to help you find a class that you're interested in, but not say, well, I took this, it's great, and you don't think it's great, then that's just too bad, you know. So helping be more than helping us.
That's a great point. Anyone else? Yes.
The advisor made the schedule for the advisor.
The advisor made a schedule for the advisor, yeah.
Told not to do anything.
Right, and the temptation will be to do that, right? Especially if you're in the same major. Like, oh, I took this is what I did really well that semester, you should just do this. But it's not, that's not ideal. But why not? Why shouldn't you build their schedules for them? Okay.
They need to know how to do it.
It's true. They need to know how to do it. And if things don't work out, you need to not be the one that they are holding responsible for that, because they might hold you responsible regardless, right? But at least they can't say, you built my schedule for me, right? I think that's why it's important to really put the ball in the student's court as far as coming to the meeting, that you do your part in preparing for the meeting, but really putting the ball in their court as far as choosing their classes for this week so that you guys can have a great conversation about that. And then again, towards the end of the conversation, after they've really been able to talk the most in the last third of the conversation, that you can then begin to advise and offer your thoughts on their schedule. Josh.
And I think there's some benefits to kind of letting them make their own mistakes as well. One, just because they learn that way, and two, like, honestly, they're not gonna let them go in the opposite direction they need to go, but like that gets them kind of more independent, and then like it kind of just helps them more in the process, I think.
That's true. But we do want the students to have the freedom to make mistakes, but if you see them walking into a land, like, you need to say something. Like, you know what, actually, and if you're not comfortable saying that, you send them to somebody who will. You're like, you know what, I think it might be a really good idea if you go talk to your association meeting and ask them about that. Like, I'm not 100% sure about that schedule. It makes me a little uncomfortable, and I really think you should go get some more advice about that. Because there are certain things, based on their background, that you may not know. And so if you are, you have to trust your gut in that if you are nervous about their schedule, that you express that concern. Anybody else? No. So we talked about some things to do in order to prepare for the meeting before and during the meeting, and then obviously some things not to do. You don't want to pretend that you know everything, right? It's really important for, again, there's a safety net for first years at the University of Virginia. We have RAs, we have the peer advisors, we have the ULink advisors, we have all of the deans over in the respective schools. There are tons of people for them to get advice from, and you want to make sure that they are aware of all of those resources. Right? That's your job kind of in being the link. And so you don't have to put the pressure on yourself to know everything. Just make sure that you can point them to the resources. And also, if you are open and honest and sincere with them, then they will be the same way with you. So that humility will translate into their, hopefully, into their experience as well. Sometimes they do have to run into the wall because they're like, okay, maybe I don't know what they did. And that happens as well, but if you can help them to at least make the wall that they run into doesn't have to be so big. The other thing is, you don't want to forget that this is not your experience. I was like a crazy one. He's like, well, I took this my first year, this was great, I had the best schedule, or, this was the best class. Like, how come we can't make a basket? Like, and really, sometimes you can forget that this is not your experience. You've had your own experience as a first year at the university. You've had the support system that you've tapped into, and they need to have their own experience as well. But you are trying to help to guide them so that maybe they don't make the same mistakes that you made. And it may even be helpful for you to share with them, like, oh, you know what, actually I did that my first year and I messed up big time. And so I don't know if that's a good idea. And being able to share those things as well. The other thing that can be tempting to do, especially as a student, is that, like, oh, that professor sucks. Like, why would you take that class? And I don't know, that could be their uncle, I don't know. it also could be a class that they have to take. It's like, I'm really interested in this particular field, and it doesn't matter that he's, a difficult person to work with. I still need to work with them. So you're kind of setting them up with those expectations before they're able to draw their own conclusions. Is it fair, right? They need to be able to draw their own conclusions. And the same thing with services, like, oh man, I went to the writing center my first year and it was awful. I'm like, oh, they just hired a new director of the writing center. They're implementing a new curriculum in the writing center. Maybe it's better now. And it doesn't matter that it wasn't helpful necessarily to you. It might be helpful to your students. So you have to make them aware of the resources and let them make their choices. Do you have a question? No? And then the last thing I would say is that just don't give up. Some of you guys might reach out to your advisors and say, hey, I want to get together and talk about our mid-semester meeting, and I was hoping that you could meet at this time, or blah, 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 blah. And they might completely blow you off, they may not show up. And your temptation will be to just write them off. I would suggest that you take the time maybe to craft an email to them, like, oh, I know, I hope your semester is going well. I hope your classes are going well. I know you're getting ready for the spring. These are some tips for meeting with your advisor. You might want to make sure you bring these things with you to that meeting. If you have any questions about these resources, go ahead and go to this website. If you have any, if you're looking for some classes to take, I know you, based on the information that you all got, I'm assuming you guys know what they're, at least the schools that they're in, or maybe their majors, or whatever. You're like, oh, okay, based on the information that I have, I know that, these classes might be interesting to you. You can put that together and send it to them in an email. You're still being useful. Who knows, maybe after doing that, they might actually reach out. I'm like, hey, I was actually wondering, can we get together for lunch and talk about that? They may not, but you're still being useful. And it's important for you guys to do that. Just reminding them of key dates and things that they may not be thinking about because they've never had a date. Kind of going into finals or whatever that you've been talking about. And then after you guys meet with your advisor, you send them a follow-up email. You want to make sure to remind them that you're there if they need you. Like, oh, I know we talked about a lot today. If you ever want to talk about some things in more detail, or after they've gone back and do some research and want to bounce some ideas off you, just make sure that you know that you're there. And then if you forgot something, it's the perfect time for you to bring it up. Oh, actually, after we met, I was thinking a little bit more about you. You might want to consider this or this resource. I forgot to mention that during our meeting. But it's good to just close the loop and keep the communication going. And so I know that I sent an email to Ricky. I think she asked you guys to bring a copy of your schedules for this semester and then some classes that you were thinking about taking in the spring. And so I thought that if you get maybe into groups of 3 this time, then you guys can practice having those meetings. Right? And so what will happen is one person will share, one person will be the advisor, one person will be the advisee, and then the third person is the observer. After they have their exchange, you're going to give some feedback on, oh, maybe you said this, maybe you could have done this. And then, so after about 5 to 7 minutes, each person can cycle through. So again, this is in groups of 3, so that you should draw somebody else into here. I was advised to do that by one of the. How are you guys doing? Was that, you guys feel like that was a useful exercise? Did everybody get to go? No? If you didn't get to go, You have ample time, you can stay afterwards and practice all you want. Did anybody want to be to share, just how was that experience for you? What you learned kind of in the process? If you were the advisor, how was that? Go ahead.
I really liked it because I got to know him a lot better because I asked how is your schedule going, like what do you do like sort of regular, like what are your activities, what do you do for fun, and like we kind of ran through one of his typical this Space Wednesdays, what he does when like waking up and sort of going to bed and stuff. Pretty good ways to do so.
And I think being able to, it also gives you an opportunity to figure out other ways to inject other skills. So this young man here in the Lakers shirt, I can't remember your name. Braden, who's like, he's like an excellent time manager, right? And so he's talking with his advising, and it comes in like, oh, they're going through the schedule, and you're like, oh, it sounds like you're having a hard time managing your time. Like, I'm actually really good at that. Let me show you what I do. Right, so they're finding this opportunity to inject yourself other times. I think that that's great. Anyone else talking about the role of the advisor?
We're all in the same major, so we actually in real life, so it was nice to be able to say, looking forward to your schedule, do you have questions about what we'll do next summer or something, so being able to link in things that are maybe on your mind now about job hunt and finding summer work, can say, oh, there's a great elective that might help prepare you for blank or something, so being able to link to, say, what's on your mind sort of in general, and because it might not just be spring classes, it might be what's after that.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I think that also speaks to, again, this network that you guys have here in this room, especially if you have people who are second, third, and fourth year, but in the same major, so you guys can help one of them bridge your skills as you're moving up. You might be like, oh, I don't know what they're doing. That's pretty awesome. Anyone else? From the role of the advisor? Yes.
Definitely admitting that you don't know everything is also important. Like when we were going through our situation, I know nothing about econ. I'm in college, but I don't know about econ. I do know though that first years often have a hard time getting in. So, even just saying that yeah, you can look at all these econ classes, talk to your friends about it if they've taken them, but just know that it might be very hard for you to get into it. And sometimes they don't even take this. So definitely have a back just in case.
Did any of you guys have any other obstacles that you faced kind of in the advisor role? Did somebody have a major that was completely outside of your scope? What's your name?
Alexis.
Alexis, go ahead.
She's in the career school and we're both in the e-school, so.
So how was that?
It was like kind of difficult to talk about the classes just because we didn't know what the requirements were, and all of our curriculums are really dead set already for us.
So what kind of advice did you give her?
We just kind of talked about like the different classes she was taking now. We couldn't really get that much advice because it is so dead set that she was kind of like, I have to take these classes.
And so is there anybody within the program that you could have turned her to?
I know somebody else in the career school that I could.
So I think this is not usually the lead situation. I believe you guys are all matched based on your school, right? But in a case like that, where you have very good knowledge, like, oh, I know that so and so is a coordinator for your school, I can get in touch with them and then have a conversation with them later. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm in college and Tay is a nursing student, but my roommate's a nursing student, so I have this knowledge that I can connect with and use some of the questions to ask, sort of probe and get more. Also saying that I was in college, so I wasn't able to help that much. But their schedules were just set already, so there wasn't so much we could do, but I think I could connect with her about what she was taking, what she had looked forward to.
And what about people who are able to play the advising in that role? What was that like? And sometimes we can forget what it's like to be a first year and kind of going and doing that. What was it like to kind of going in and talking to somebody you don't know that well about the schedule, they're asking all these questions? Daniel?
The one thing that my partner did was really good was being enthusiastic. Because it's sort of a weird, scary situation you go into. So the more enthusiasm the advisor has, the more comfortable the advisor will feel that, without going over the top. You be creepy about it.
From the role of the advisee. No? I know other people play the role. Somebody will be advised. Yes.
I just like, when we were talking about the sort of the career and the job thing, that we, based on her tone, we could be joking about it, we could be sarcastic and be funny about it, but if she had said like, I'm really, really nervous or I'm really worried about it, you would have had to sort of scale to her level as well. So I guess she was able to set the tone with me when I said, how's this going? How's your spring schedule going? And we could be, we were positive about it, but if she said, oh, I don't know, it's really weighing on me in this and this, that I would have been able to step back. So I guess just reading, both from the advisor and the advisee, it can be uncomfortable if your advisor's very, very like, what about this, what about this, what about this, and you
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the other thing I think that you have to be careful of is because your advisors don't know you very well, there will be a temptation at the very least for them to kind of perform for you. And everything is great, I got everything down pat, all these things. And so you don't want to get distracted by that and not ask more probing questions. Because as you ask more questions, you might realize that they aren't really fantastic, or you might think that actually it sucks. I'm having a really hard time. And so you don't want to get distracted by that, because that is, especially if they think they're like, oh wow, this person is an advisor, and they got chosen to be a part of this program because they're really smart. I don't want them to think that I'm dumb or silly or whatever if I have these questions. So you have to just draw them out. And maybe even volunteer some of the information that they probably should be asking you, but they're not. Does that make sense?
Kind of going off what you just said, I feel like it's important to kind of show, it's gonna sound weird, but to kind of show weakness, if that makes sense. Just because as an upperclassman, they're gonna see you as like this like sitting on a pedestal that like knows everything and can manage everything. But like to show that like you made mistakes, like I withdrew from a class and like it's okay. Most people think it's not okay that you might not get a job, but it's okay if you feel like you're like really struggling in your classes. So it's like kind of showing weakness when you can, not being artificial either, but like being honest about like maybe things that you learned from helps them like open up to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because you will have students, depending on when you meet with them, where they are questioning, oh, should I withdraw from this class? And I always tell students that W is better than an F. And it's true, because you can explain the W your first year, first semester. Transitioning to college was really hard, but an F just sounds like you didn't do well. You weren't working hard. And so you want to, if they're wrestling with that, you want to be able to be sensitive to them. I can't remember your name.
Tom. But going off what she said, yeah, I think you definitely need to show some weaknesses too, because you don't want them to be intimidated by you. I think one of mine might have in a sense been like that, because after the first email I sent her, she replied saying she both equally succeeded and enjoyed in every subject she'd ever taken, and like all this stuff trying to like impress me. So I just kind of, and I mean, me reading that kind of was like, okay, well, like you, like, why'd you ask for me if you don't, like, I don't know. Like, so definitely like make it seem like you don't have, in the sense of like you don't have everything figured out either. That kind of makes sense.
We're on this journey together. Like I'm walking with you. We're on this journey together. That's right. I just wanted to, that's all I had planned for today. I wanted to open up the floor for any questions. I know we kind of talked about a lot of things. If you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask. Yes.
So I'm an econ major, and so I got paired with a lot of pre-com / maybe econ majors. And one thing I found very difficult was that I've been an econ major since the beginning. I was not pre-com, and so I know I can do my research and figure out what com is and like what they need to do, but I found it difficult because they aren't really, like at this stage, they're not really interested in econ. They're just taking the econ like requisites that they need to take, but besides that, they're just, it's like I'm not very much a resource, so I'm having a difficulty having them feel like I can help them.
Well, that makes sense. I think one of the things that you might encourage them to do, or is that there's Janine Fields who's over in the comm school, and she works with a lot of the students who are interested in the School of Commerce, and so she can share information with you. So there's certain subjects that they have to take the calculus and even take the econ, so you might be familiar with those things. But then they want to begin to maybe network into the comm school as well. They have a lot of information sessions and things like that they host, especially in the beginning of the semesters. So they'll have one. Even, I tell first year students that they should go to the interest meetings that they host for second years who are applying to the comm school. Because then they can sit there and hear all that information and then be prepared for the meeting next year when they come in. And so some of it is just being aware in that sense, so you can tell them how to plug in to those resources. Was that helpful? Yes.
This isn't something I've presented here, but I know some of the advisors who I help coordinate have had not super positive interactions with their advisees who weren't interested in them, who were unresponsive. And I really liked your point about saying, hey, you're registering for your spring classes soon. Here's some things to keep in mind. Please reach out to me if you need anything. But is there anything, if you have someone that's unresponsive or is really interested in the advice, maybe they do have everything together, in which case they should come advise me about how to get it. But if someone feels that way, is there anything else I should help my advisors do to be there?
Right, I think part of the challenge is that a lot of people come into this role for different reasons. Some people are like, oh, I want to be a mentor, I want to be somebody's big sister or big brother, I want to be a great friend. And other people are like, I just want to be a resource. So if they need something, great. If they don't need something, great. And it's not, so if somebody's sharing, like, oh, their disappointment because their advisees are not responsive, it's because they were looking more so for that relationship. I think you have to remind them that, it could sound mean, like, this role is not about you. It really is about you providing your advisors what they need. And I know with my peer advisors, when they have unresponsive advisors, I'm like, just adopt somebody else's advisors. There are other students in your school who need, first year students in your school who need help, who are lost. Get to know them and use the information that you're gaining in these sessions so that you can share it with them as well. If you're looking to making those connections. And then again, keeping up with the unresponsive people in terms of email, because you're still providing those resources. And they're probably reading them. I've had several instances of students who are at the end of the year get an email from an advisor who ignored them for a whole year. They're like, thank you so much for emailing me once a week. I really appreciate everything you have to say. I didn't really need you, but I read all of your emails. But they get that, at least they know that somebody was on the other end of that, and they appreciated it, even though they weren't appreciative of all of it. Anyone else? Great, well, that's all I have for today. I'm just really excited for you guys. I know that advising is something that I love. I love being able to mentor people. One of the reasons why I love working with peer advisors is because I get to watch them kind of grow into their role and watching them as they learn about the resources at the university and they gain their confidence. It's really exciting for me to kind of stand and to be in a role as they learn how to do that. And I imagine that it's similar to the people that are on exec here, and as the program grows, and you guys see more people grow in that way. It'll be exciting, as you all are the trailblazers at this point. So thank you so much for your attention. If you guys have any questions, you can definitely go through the recap.
If you haven't signed in yet, please sign it on